Eric Lewis was a 57 years old man who enjoyed adventures and climbing mountains. He had a degree in fine arts and photography. He lived in Duval, Washington and had a habit of calling his mom every Saturday to let her know what's going on. Eric had been in Chile, New Zealand, Argentina, Nepal and other countries conquering different mountains. On July 1st, 2010, Eric decided to hike the Mount Rainier peak, which was close to his residence and he had already conquered it 10 times. But this time he was taking a different route from Gibraltar Ledge. He was hiking with two other experienced mountaineers named Don Storm Jr. and Trevor Lane. They started their climbing in the morning. The weather was great and the men weren't loaded with heavy equipment or heavy clothing. Don was leading the group and at 14,000 feet they decided to take a break. At this point the weather started to get bad. It was windy and snow was starting to fall down. Trevor reached Don's spot and the two were waiting for Eric to reach them. Eric hooked onto the rope and was climbing to his friend's spot. Don could see glimpses of Eric and then suddenly the rope went limp. After a few minutes, Don started to pull on the rope. He pulled up a loop knot at the end but no climbing harness, carabiner or any sight of Eric. At this point, the weather was really bad and the two men couldn't see 5 feet afar. The two men realized Eric must have unhooked, but they couldn't see why he did that. Trevor and Don waited out the storm and then descended to the spot they assumed Eric must have unhooked. At 13,800 feet, they found a cave that they assumed it was probably used by Eric. In the cave they found Eric's backpack, snow shovel and climbing harness. The two men looked around but there was nobody on their side. They decided to descend and let the rangers know of the disappearance. Rangers immediately went to the location and got to the summit but they didn't find Eric. The Park Service sent out 50 searchers, 2 helicopters and commercial guides with no success of finding the experienced hiker. Eric Lewis was never found. 18 months old Lee Littlejohn was being looked after by his aunt on December 23rd of 1977 at his aunt's residence 7 miles west of Redding, California. The residence was close to Whiskeytown National Recreation Area. Lee was playing with his 2-year-old cousin Loy Fry and the dog pets inside the home during a heavy rainstorm when his aunt went to another area of the house to do laundries. When she came back after 10 minutes to check on the kids, she couldn't find either child or their pet dogs. She searched the home and surrounding areas and soon the county sheriff was notified. The sheriff brought some forces to search for the kids, but the heavy rainstorm made it very hard to find any tracks. After an hour of sheriff's arrival, they found Loy Fry close to the home with his dog. But she could not say where Lee was located. Loy was cold but in a good condition. The search for Lee continued and by the morning of the next day, 200 volunteers arrived to search for the kid. In the morning, searchers saw Lee's dog coming towards the house without Lee. Searchers tried to make the dog show where Lee was, but he wasn't interested. At noon of the next day, searchers found the body of Lee on a wooded ridge 3/4 of a mile from his home. His body was on a steep hill and they found it 23 hours after he went missing. Lee wasn't wearing any shoes or socks when they found his body. He had only light trousers and a t-shirt. The county sheriff stated they didn't think the boy could go that far in just 23 hours, especially when it was a steep hill. Children naturally know to not leave the warmth of their house and to not go outside when there is a heavy rainstorm. How Lee Littlejohn got lost and died in the outskirts of Redding, California remains a mystery to this day. On February 7, 1981, 9 years old James Beveridge was hiking the trails of Mount Palomar with his 17 years old and 7 years old brothers in Southern California. This area is very rugged and water is hard to find on the side that the brothers were hiking. But on the other side of the mountain, there are a couple of small lakes. James was at the back of the group hiking when somehow he disappeared. The other two brothers looked for him for a while and then went back to their car to notify their parents. The parents then called the authorities and a search was started. James was wearing a down coat, tennis shoes and long pants. The weather was fine at the time of James' disappearance. But few hours after his disappearance, a heavy rain started in the area which hampered the search effort. The area got 3.5 inches of rain. It's worth mentioning the average annual rainfall in this area is 13.79 inches, which means the area got almost 25% of its annual rainfall over a night. On the next day of James' disappearance, searchers found some tracks of the 9-year-old in the wilderness, but they had no success in finding the boy. 2 days after James went missing, searchers found his tennis shoes and his coat in an area higher in elevation than when he was last seen. It was almost near the summit. They found the clothes 3 miles from the family's car. During the search, James' grandfather, who was a retired police officer, was also part of the search group and he went missing in the area. So the group now was searching for James' grandfather as well. The search for James included US Forest Service officers, canine dogs, helicopters and volunteers. After 2 days of raining non-stop, the aircraft was finally allowed near the mountains. 3 days after James went missing, a hiker which was not part of the search group found James' body on a steep hillside. The hill was almost straight up and down. It was also covered with thick bushes and James was only wearing a t-shirt, pants and socks. It was determined he died from exposure. 2 days after they found the body of James, they found his grandpa barely alive, wet and hungry. There is not much info on James' grandpa's disappearance. How James died in the mountains of Palomar remains a mystery to this day.